Hello. We've been listening to some incredibly resilient stories, very uplifting ones, very inspirational ones. And we come across this in our daily lives. But today I'm going to take you on a grand tour of absolute failure. It has got nothing to do with success. Maybe in one way it might have. But the idea behind this is to understand failure. And not just failure, not just how you fail, but how you fail brilliantly. And I take all of this from my experience in my work in audio engineering and in ways that I have failed. I have failed countless times, and I think I still would fail more. But the point is, it's not about when you fail. The point is to understand how you fail, and if you're failing, why not do it in style? So I'll be talking about 6 ways or 6 phases that we would be facing when we look at failing. The first is academics, and I'm pretty sure we all understand Fourier transform, and we all also know the fact that Fourier transform will never save us in a bar fight. It's only there so that, most of the times we look at it as something that we want to get marks out of. But Fourier transform is amazing, and the problem in this is this. Trust me, as an audio engineer, you will never come across this, because if I was an audio engineer and my work was swiping up on Instagram, it would take me less than 3 seconds to do that on this. But what we really fail to see, or when we learn, is this is, again, a really great part that failing in academics is we don't really see the beauty of this. I mean, we see a tilted line. The first thing we do is we switch off. It's very hard. We shouldn't be going there. But the Fourier transform is actually something that's equivalent to looking at a cake and asking the cake, okay, how many eggs do you have in this? Or how much vanilla essence is there in this? How much sugar is there in this? And this is the very same thing we do in audio. Like you play back a piece of music, you hear me talk, you hear my voice on the speaker, and you're going to find out how much of a particular signal is there, how much of this particular frequency is there. The problem in academics is we don't find that intuition. I mean, looking at this, nobody's going to tell you about this intuition, right? I mean, why would you think about it? Because you're going from negative infinity to infinity. I mean, I think after 100,000, I don't think anything matters anymore. So negative infinity to infinity, that itself is a value we don't understand. We have x of f. Again, it's a capital X and a small x. And as if we don't have anything more, there's a lot of Greek numbers and letters over there. And there's minus j. Again, minus j is something in mathematics, in physics, and minus I is the same thing in mathematics. And it can get complicated really fast. But if you look at this image as it is a great way to fail. And this is something you should take if you want to fail at academics. I am going to talk about how you can fail in every single step. Great. So this is academics, and we go on to the job, because that's the natural progression. You finish your academics, you want a job, right? Now, the thing about job is, especially in my field of work, is we all talk about passion. I'm very passionate. I love my work, and I'm very passionate about doing this. I'm very passionate about doing that. Don't get me wrong. Passion is not a wrong thing. In fact, passion is what will drive you to success. But passion is also something that will drive you to failure. And that failure is different from the success that you will have. I am a very passionate person when it comes to mixing, that I spend a lot of time in the studio. In fact, a lot of time where I forget what day it is, whether it's morning or evening, because the studio is generally like this. It's dark. And then I tend to fail in a lot of things. I tend to fail in my social life. I tend to fail in my personal life, where I tend to burn out, because if you're very passionate, you lose sense of time. You absolutely love the thing that you're doing. You lose sense of time. You will not focus your dedication on these little packets of time. What happens is, in the long run, you lose your health, you lose your friends, you won't have someone to go out for a coffee with, and then you will be there staring at your screen just because you're passionate. And in my case, we spend hundreds of hours mixing sound for a film that is just 2.5 hours long, and that someone in theater goes and says, it was okay, So it is passion that drives us, but it is also passion that causes us to fail in a lot of other things. Right, let's look at something else. Sports. See, The most number of sports that I have in my life is counting the sheep that jump over the proverbial thing when you go to sleep. That is, if I go to sleep. And most of the times, I don't think I go to sleep. I just fall off after a couple of days. So where does sports come in this? I have 8 best friends. And one of my best friends' name is Pooja Krishnamurthy. She's an ultra runner and an entrepreneur. And Pooja turned 40 last month. It was on a weekend. And I met Pooja a couple of days back, and I asked her, so Pooja, how was your birthday weekend? And she said, like, oh, I ran 100 miles in 25 hours. What did you do? Well, I saw 3 kittens chase a rabbit. That was my weekend. I mean, you come across like incredibly passionate people like this, and when you say one has run 100 miles in 25 hours, if I run 2 kilometers in my sleep, I have to wake up and go back to sleep. That's the amount of effort that I see in doing something like that. And I asked her, like, Pooja, how do you fail? Or like, what happens if you fail? And her answer was incredible. Her answer was, think of everything that will pull you down. Bad weather, fail. People didn't come to cheer for you, scream. You have an injury, pain. You decide that you're not going to get into it, stop. You want to fall asleep, sleep. Because when you're running an ultra marathon for 100 miles in 25 hours, you're not sleeping. You can take all of these things along with you in your run and decide to fail. And they have something that's called DNF, or did not finish. Sometimes you look at that, and that you can also express that as dramatically negative feelings, which can take you all on the way to failure. So the point is, you see how you can fail. And these are brilliant ways of failing, by the way. Don't get me wrong. The idea is to have a brilliant way to fail. I mean, we can all hear success stories and how you want to be successful. They're very inspiring. But when you're sitting there in the dumps and you've failed, you sit back and look back, you have no idea how you got there. It's like the thing in Inception. Do you remember how you got to this place in your dream? You don't. And that's when you think it's a dream. Society. Now, society is a very important thing, because the society, when I was 22 and 21, is not the society that we have today. I wasn't judged this constantly. I mean, we did have social media, if you think about MySpace, Orkut, Facebook. That should explain my age to you at some point. But, we were not constantly judged by this. The thing today, if you want to absolutely fail in society, is simple. Just become average. Follow the trends. Look at what somebody else is doing. But then how does this come back into audio? It's simple, because if I start mixing films, and if I start mixing every single film in the same way, that wouldn't fly. So if I do everything in the same way, people wouldn't come to me. They wouldn't see anything that is exceptional or something that they think would add to their film. So the best way to fail in anything, especially in a society, is to become average. Follow all the trends. Judge someone who's not following the trend. I don't even know what the new move is, but you would have a song that comes in and you have a move. In fact, audio engineering is one of the very few careers that you can choose, which is both technical and artistic. In fact, it's almost like moving your right hand forward and your left hand backward. Of course, when I say it does look difficult, and if you try it out also, it might be difficult, but it is not impossible. So the idea in society is, if you become average, you will not progress, because progress happens by mistake. You make mistakes, you find out something from that, and then you use that to move ahead. We've been hearing stories of trailblazers and stories of inspirational people over here. Our job is to fail. We're looking at the road to failure. So become average. That's a great thing. Relationships. This is an absolute favorite of mine. For a long time, I was hearing Simon Sinek talk a couple of days back on one of his YouTube channels, and this is a very fascinating thought. His point was, we have institutions for failed marriages. We have career counselors. We have the gym if you have a bad health. But we have no place that will tell you how to be a good friend. People are not taught how to be a good friend. People are taught how to become good in life, how to get a great job, how to look good, how to feel good. They never teach you how to be a good friend. The easiest way to fail in becoming a good friend is letting things be. It does sound very Buddhist, but it doesn't work in this case. If you let things be, it means you're not taking an effort in anything. And let me tell you a story of mine that happened as well. So there was this film, there's a good friend of mine, Kunal Sharma, he's a sound designer. And he called me, he said, Sri, there's this film I want you to mix. And I said, no, Kunal, I'm doing another project. He said, okay. He put the phone down. A couple of days later, he calls me again, Sri, just I want to think about it. There's this film I want you to mix. And he said, no, again. So he did that 3 times. And a couple of days later, the trailer for his film released. And I was watching that. And there was another friend of mine, Parikshit, whose film I was doing at the time. And we were both watching this trailer and said, like, this looks kick-ass. It looks fantastic. And Parikshit asked me, like, who's doing this? And I said, like, yeah, Kunal asked me to do this film, but I said no. He's like, are you out of your mind? You should do it. But I said, like, look, dude, I'm doing your film. He said, it's okay. You're doing my film, but these are films that you have to take. And if you're doing my film, I will shave off those times from my film so that you can get the time to do this film. And funnily enough, the Kunal's film was Gangs of Wasseypur. And Parikshit's film was Rowdy Rathod. And these 2 films were done simultaneously. One was a commercial blockbuster, the other got me my national award. So if you want to fail, don't be Parikshit. That's a great way to fail. Don't think about other people. You can focus on yourself. Don't be a good friend. Don't look after the other person. Be selfish. Look after your own interests in life. Manipulate people the way you want them to be, and move on. That's how you can fail in relationships. Because relationships is not just about romance. It's not just about siblings. It's not just about parents. It is about friendship as well. And friendship is a very, very important factor when it comes to things. Life. Now, the thing in life is, it's a very difficult thing to say, because if I start talking about life, either I'll be too old or I'll be not old enough to talk about life. There are only 2 ways you can go about this. But the same thing comes in audio as well. The same thing comes when you're mixing a film. For example, the question, what if? What if is a very unique question, actually. It is the same question that can make or break. What if I do this and it goes wrong? It's the same question as, what if I do this and I find something else? We can choose to go to the direction that we want, but if you always choose the what if as a sense of fear, and you step back from doing things like that, it's an easy way to fail in life. What if is a thing that will propel you forward, but then if you want to use that, you can step back and decide to fail. I've always been doing what ifs and whatnots, actually. So my whole mixes are riddled with a lot of experiments and a lot of, I wouldn't say it's a lot of thought. It's more something that comes to me organically. But then the point is, if I don't do this, I can set myself up to failure. And each one of these 6 points that I've told you are points where I have failed before. And I have seen that failure. The next most important thing, even though I did say 6 ways to fail brilliantly, and then if I bring up a 7th one, I don't know if you would consider that a failure or a success, but it is this. If you fail at failing, is that a success or did you actually fail? That's a good question. The thing about failing is, we all see the stories at the point of failure. We stop there. When we are down, when we have failed, when we are depressed, when we are anxious, when we think we have nowhere to go, when we are at the very bottom, that is what we see. And we always forget to look at the journey we took to come there. We fail to identify patterns of things that took us there. The point of this, the point of failing brilliantly, or ways of failing brilliantly, is to see the patterns that took you there. Parikshit actually told me a very interesting thing. It's the story, it's a concept called but and the and. So if I wanted to travel, so I can say this as, I want to travel, but I have no money. Or I can rephrase that and say, I want to travel, and I have no money. Both of them are different things. One is a straight case for failure. The other one are 2 separate events for which you would find individual answers. You want to travel, you find a way to travel. You have no money, you find a way to make money. You don't need to club these 2 things. These are 2 different things. For example, If you ask me what my name is, oh, I'm wearing a jeans. These are two separate events. These have nothing in common, but we tend to put this together. So the point in this whole talk is, it is okay to fail. You will fail. It is not always about success, because the success that we see in people are the stories that are written after the multiple failures that have happened. And we've never seen those multiple failures. We've never seen the times where they were struggling with things, where they were struggling with concepts, and we've never seen any of that. It's the same thing with academics, but again, if you directly apply that to your exam grades, I don't think that would fly off. You want multiple failures and then you pass. No. But the thing is, when you see success, also look at how they failed, because that is what is the pattern that you need to recognize before you step into the point of failure. Thank you for listening to me. This is what I want to say.